Welcome.
So we will probably start our panel discussion at about 4:15. Yep. In the meantime, if for those who have already joined us, feel free to go and grab a drink, go for your toilet break, because immediately after the film, if it somehow evoked certain emotions and you're busy crying, then that's fine too. Go and get a tissue, wash your face, do that. Don't have to switch on your camera yet. It's absolutely fine too. So we'll start at about 4:15. So bear with us for a little while.
So I'd like to say a very warm welcome again to everyone who is just joining us. Very good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us. Many of us have a lot of other things to do on Saturday afternoons, I'm sure, with family and with friends. And, to have all of you come and watch this film and be part of this panel discussion is very heartening for us. As part of the team for Kena Film Festival, we are basically just a team of volunteers who are passionate about film, and not just film, but the social content and themes that actually come about in a lot of the films that we choose to select and screen. And these films are, obtained from all over the world in many different languages. So, and we regret that, during the pandemic, of course, we had to shift everything online, and there were, of course, certain issues and glitches which we had to get over. I'm very fortunate to have an awesome team and an awesome co-festival director, Winifred. Many of you may know her. She is actually the founder of Kiana Film Festival, and it was, basically formed with the vision of having a platform, a film festival where people could go with discerning views and discerning set of eyes, right, and discerning heart and mind to think about the issues that will be discussed as film directors, with their respective filmmaker intents and the respective messages that they want to communicate to the audience. So I think that is something which we found that bit of a sweet spot in a way, if you might call it that way, to sort of have some room for discussion, right? And why not, if we are faith-based people and want to look at it from the lens of a religious point of view and from our own experiences, our own lived experiences, everybody has a different set of experiences, right? And it is our hope that these films will touch your heart in one way or another, that would inspire us to live meaningfully. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that film spoke to you in one way or another. And we are just a couple of minutes out, I think, from beginning the panel discussion. So just wanted to have just a quick chat and welcome everybody and really thank all of you for your support. And to also make a few announcements to say that, we are looking to have our physical screenings towards the end of the year. We are still working the schedule out, because I mean our film partner, our venue partner was actually Film Guard, and we are in the works of thinking about some dates in the future this year. Yeah, provided of course the situation of the pandemic stabilizes. Okay, so I think we have hit 4:15 p.m. and what I'm gonna do is just to formally start the panel discussion and get it going. So all of you, if you have your coffee in front of you, or just be comfortable and just be relaxed. And I encourage you, get involved in the discussion, participate, send your questions through the chat room, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. And before I pass the baton over to our moderator for today, Timothy, I will do a quick introduction and share with all of you a few slides that I have. So bear with me for a couple of minutes. Okay, so we have here, I'm sharing this QR code. It's basically a feedback QR code, and we hope to improve every edition that we have to have, in terms of the quality of films, in terms of the presentation, and in terms of how we actually get the program out to the public. Yeah, so take a screenshot of this, or you can scan it and give us your feedback. It will be very, very much appreciated. Okay, and then for this is basically Kena Film Festival, and this is our logo, of course, and our tagline is Media for the Soul. So we try to curate films which speak to your heart in a certain way, right? And to have social themes within these films so that it will inspire us to have a bit of a inner reflection on our lives and see how we can actually better live our lives because film is such a powerful medium. Yeah. And we have this set of social teachings that we always fall back on or we use as a lens to view these films. So these are a set of 10 Catholic social teachings. You can actually see it on our website. It's called canalfilmfestival.com/Catholic Social Teachings. The URL is there. But just to give you an overview, these are the 10 social teachings, and we feel that these are very universal in their nature, right? So, for example, the promotion of peace, we want to promote love for thy neighbor. We want to promote a care for creation, care for the environment and the resources that have been given to us. How do we become better stewards of what we have? And how do we give back to society, right? So these are all very universal values, and at the same time have very a great bearing on how we live our lives as Christians as well. Whether or not you have faith or not, a different kind of faith, that's also fine because it's how we really want to live our lives. And in each of our film screenings, we encourage everyone to think about any of these social teachings and reflect internally as you watch the film. What messages jump out at me? What kind of impact these scenes actually have or have made in my viewing experience? And how do I internalize them? Right? Do they have any? Does it resonate with me in terms of my relationships with my friends, my colleagues, my coworkers, or even strangers that I bump into? Yeah. Okay, and then the panel discussion for today, we have a very, very esteemed panel, very, very relevant to the theme of palliative care as well that is related to this film. So first and foremost, we have Dr. Ong Eugene. He's from the Catholic Medical Guild. They are actually a group of healthcare professionals who actually help to answer what we call medical moral questions or issues that may arise and how do we realize our Catholic vocation through our professions? Yeah, so definitely a very, very esteemed member on the panel. We also have with us Ms. Chu Shu Ling. She's the CEO of Assisi Hospice. Some of you may know they're near Mount Alvernia Hospital, and they actually provide palliative care for patients with life-limiting illnesses, right, and their families. So regardless of their faith, their race, or even their financial position, I think Assisi Hospice helps them in the best way possible. And we have also with us Sister Teresa Lim from the Daughters of St. Paul Media Apostolate. So they are really, really good in terms of navigating a secular digital culture, but with our faith as a lens, right? To learn how to live our life. So definitely a panel that's really, really well set to provide us a very, very meaningful discussion. So we really look forward to that. And of course, our moderator is Timothy Wong. He is also like our CFF alumni. He's helped us in many, many other panel discussions as well. So very, very happy to have all of you on board. And from here on, I will hand you over to the good hands of Timothy, and please enjoy the panel discussion. Thank you, everybody. Tim.
Okay, thank you, Ben, and welcome again to everybody. So thank you for joining us for this post-movie screening panel discussion. While it's a panel discussion, I think it's primarily because it's a discussion. We definitely will welcome and appreciate and value any kind of contribution you have to this discussion. So it's not just about the panelists, giving their views as well, but also in response to how you feel about this movie, what your thoughts and perspectives might be, and we can take the discussion from there, right? So you may have questions. You may have certain comments that you wish to say. You may have certain responses to what some people here may be saying and sharing about this particular movie or the response to this movie. So you can do that in two ways, just so that we know what the modes might be. One is you can unmute your mic at any point in time to contribute and to just, if you wish to show your video, go ahead and please do so. If you don't feel comfortable with that, it's absolutely fine as well. So you can unmute yourself, and then after that, at any point in time, I'll pause, and then we can welcome certain certain comments, and feel free to do that. Okay, so that's one way of doing that. Now, if you wish to, while sometimes when people are talking and sharing certain things, certain thoughts might come in, and you don't want to lose that. So if you wish to type it out, you can also do so via the chat box. So if you scroll your mouse over to the bottom of the screen, you should see a chat icon towards the bottom, and so you just click that, and then you just type in your message there. It can be a question that you have to a specific panelist or to the general panel. It can be a comment that you have in response to some of the questions that are being raised along the way in the discussion. So feel free to just type anything, right? In that sense, that might contribute to this meaningful discussion that we're going to have this afternoon. So thank you again, everybody, and we look forward to that, okay? So just a very quick way to start us off, maybe if you can just do me a favor by going into the chat box. And then I want you to just do a quick check-in, help us do a quick check-in, right? If there were to be one word that you would use to represent or to encapsulate your response or experience of watching this film, what would that be, right? So if you were to choose one word, what would that word be in terms of to encapsulate or to represent your response to this film? So I invite you to maybe just take the next 20 seconds, go to the chat box and type that one word in so that we can also have a sense of how this group over here in terms of our audience members as well as panelists feel about this movie so far, okay? So just a quick pop into the chat and it will just take about 20 seconds to do that. Thank you. I see already some responses coming in, so thank you for that. Let's continue to have more. Okay, I think it looks like a pause for a little while, no problem. Feel free to continue to give in your responses, okay? But I thought this would give us actually a very good start in terms of how we feel about this movie as a group here, as a community here in this post-screening panel discussion. So, I mean, clearly we see some very, very vast differences in terms of some slightly more positive, some slightly more, not so much negative, but perhaps a disturbance of sort. And by disturbance here, it doesn't have to take a negative connotation, but clearly provoking a certain kind of response from you, whether in terms of a slightly more negative or positive kind of emotion. So let's unpack this and let's see how we continue to see what kind of points and why that's the case, right, in terms of our experience watching this film. So if I can just maybe throw the question to our very first question, and please, and we can continue to have those questions along the way as well. So we'll just start off by throwing this question to our panelists here. So if you were to have that one word to represent that response that you have in relation to this film, what would that be? I think Shu Ling actually started us off by, I mean, as in terms of, she actually typed in the word complex, right? What complex? A lot to unpack, really. Very good. Thank you. So maybe you can start us off by just sharing with us why that word complex, right? And feel free to, of course, share your own experience with regard to, what the themes are and the topics that come up from this film.
Oh, I suppose I say complex because, we have such vastly different life experiences, vastly different worldviews, vastly different networks and social systems. Some have more, some have less. So, when it comes to the end of life, it all condenses down to this short period of time where we deal with so many issues we've experienced all our life. So it is complex. And you can see from Lucia, right? It's taken her that long, 8 years, to deal with what she's gone through. And finally, she meets this professor, which gives her something. So it's complex.
Thank you for that. And complex, I guess, exactly like what you say, right? There's so many things that came up in this movie, I'm quite sure to all of us, and some for me, not just in terms of the issue of death or terminal illness, or but also family, having been caretakers of people who are terminally ill, relationships. And I guess that's where, Eugene actually mentioned the word connection. So naturally, when we talk about people and human relations that are being featured, connection will be a key part. So can you share a little bit more with us why that word connection struck you when you talk about the response to the film, Eugene?
Okay, thanks, Timothy. I suppose it's both about a lack of connection as well as an attempt for connection. I think the whole arc of the movie, suggests that the mother is still trying to connect with the deceased daughter, and you have this son who's desperately trying to connect with the mom, and the mom doesn't seem to be aware of that. The son who's desperately trying to reach out to her, and as Chuling said, somehow in this connection with this professor that enters into her life at this point in time, at the end of the movie, I mean, it doesn't really say very clearly, but that suggests that there's perhaps this hope that this reconnection between the mother and son may happen again. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Eugene. So, Sister Teresa, how do you feel about this film? If you were to use one word or an image even, how would you respond to that?
Well, I have put the word "like" because looking at the whole movie, it's a matter of choice on how we want to live our life. We face so many difficulties. I mean, looking at our own situation now with the pandemic and all that, and when our life is being brought to the limit, what do we choose? The dignity of living a life to the fullest. And like what Shuling and Eugene has said, connection and the complexity of life. And all this boils down to what is the meaning of life and how do we really appreciate the life that God has given to us and how to live it to the full, whether it's sickness, whether it's family, whether it's traumas, or whether it's whatever we are facing, but the real meaning of life and the life that God has given to us, how do we live it on this earth?
Thank you, Sister. And I mean, if we were to make just a quick link, not that we have to, right, but just a quick link to Catholic social teaching, one of the main things, of course, is about the dignity of the human person, isn't it? And so when we talk about that life, that dignity of life, more often than not, usually, I mean, especially when we talk about a sensitive and a common, evocative kind of topic like the end of life, it often is, people always think about that, just the end point, right, as just this period. Suddenly that's all that matters, and then everything else in the life doesn't seem to matter anymore, right? And so this common kind of a jump straight to, oh no, I've only has X number of weeks or months to live, and so what does that mean? And all of a sudden there's this retrospective look life, and or if not even at all, and somehow it just matters in just that last few moments just before they pass on. So can you share a little bit more, maybe, Sister, in terms of this dignity of human life, right? What does it mean in the entire spectrum of life on earth or even after as well?
Well, God has created us to live life to the fullest, and many times we take life as of now, but we don't think of life at the last moment. I mean, we don't wait till the last moment to really think of, okay, I only have this month, but time has been given to us, and how do we use this time to really appreciate our life with family, with friends, with creation, and how do we really live this life instead of waiting, okay, I only have a few months more. I mean, like now, if we take, for example, the pandemic catches everyone by surprise. We don't know who is going to be the next victim. We don't know who is going to be suffering at this end, but to enjoy the presence at this very moment, I think that's very important, to appreciate that God has given us this life to give glory to Him and through our whole life, and not only at the last minute and we say what's going to happen, and there are many unfinished things, and then we say I haven't appreciated life, I should have done this, I should have done that, but to really take each moment as given to us by God to live to the fullest.
Thank you, Sister. Any point in time, if anybody wishes to jump in, please feel free to do so, whether via the comments or if you can unmute yourself and make a quick comment in response to what everybody is or anyone is saying at any point in time. Please feel free to do so. Okay. So I mean, since we're talking about just the entire spectrum of life and how that's being portrayed, right? I think one of the key things that obviously come up is about the fact that these are terminally ill more often than not. patients who are at the end of their life who may be suffering. And I think this is one of the key themes that also came up, right? I don't know whether you recall this scene of the son being in the classroom, and then there's the teacher talking about life and suffering and Christ coming down and what that means. And he asked this question about, oh, does it mean that to live a Christian life means that we need to suffer as well? And I think this whole what suffering means to obviously people who are suffering, especially towards the end of their life, that's something that is not just complex, but it probably touches many different aspects of how we respond to our own lives. So maybe just a quick question to both our panelists as well as to our audience. Right? Is there anything here that struck you in particular when we talk about your how it's being portrayed in terms of the suffering or the end of life when we talk about these terminally ill? Is there anything that you wish to clarify, questions that you might have, comments that you'd like to make in relation to how it's being represented in this film?
My name is Michelle, and I put
Hello. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. I put for my one word, the word guilt, because my grandmother died of cancer 10 years ago. She was fortunate enough never to have had to spend any time in hospital. She was ill at home and received palliative care at home. And I was 10 years younger, and I didn't know how to deal with an elderly sick person, My parents are still alive. My in-laws are still alive. They are hale and hearty in their 80s. My grandmother had cancer when she was 88. She died at 93. And she was still sprightly until the end. It was only in the last 1 month that she really drifted away. And I just didn't know how to handle it, she was so different. She was an entirely different person. I couldn't have that connection. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to pray with her even. And I felt very guilty because looking back, I could have accompanied her. I think accompaniment and showing love with the sick person during their suffering is so very important. And maybe just to listen to them. But grandma didn't really say very much. She was very stoic. And so I just didn't know what to do. And then in the end, she passed away. And yeah, I'm just left feeling guilty. I know she's very happy where she is now because she was such a good person. But how do you, what counsel would you give to someone who is having to journey with a terminally ill person? Because grandma, after a while, no treatment worked on her because she was too old anyway, and the cancer was too fast spread. It was from the lung, and then it went to the brain, and then to the bones. But I must say, it was relatively painless. So I think that was God's blessing. But how would you advise someone to actually make a connection with a loved one who is just drifting away? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really, thank you for that sharing, the very personal sharing. And I think for many of us here, I'm sure that it's we all would have at some point perhaps, I think the odds are quite high, that we've encountered death. Right. And so I think that's such a profound question. How do we journey? How do we accompany? And if any of our audience members wishes to type in, how you yourself felt that, in terms of perhaps journeying with somebody or your experience of, watching somebody who does journey with somebody else, please feel free to share that as well, other than also just unmuting your mic. But maybe I'll just throw that question that Michelle asked to our two panelists who obviously have quite a bit of experience. That's what I believe, when it comes to people, whether in palliative care, in hospices. So maybe to Shu Ling, and then after that to Eugene as well, right? Do you have any, I don't think that's necessarily the right answer, but based on your experience, what does it mean to journey with somebody towards the end of life, especially when they are in pain, when they are suffering?
Thank you, Timothy, for saying that it's not necessarily the right answer. Michelle, that you feel guilty, of course, that doesn't feel good. But I would actually say that you express all this wish that you could have done more. because she was such a lovely person. I think it's a testimony of who you are, the depth of what you wanted to give to this person that you love. And so, dealing with a final journey is a remarkably, remarkably difficult thing to do, because it's not just someone who's dying, right? It's someone who has lived a whole life, who's got this huge personality, which probably meant so much to us. So, which is why, in a movie you see just the nurse Lucia, but in palliative care, when patients come to us, oh, we need a whole team of people. We've got our doctors, our nurses, our social workers, counselors, pastoral care staff, music therapists, art therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists. And we found that for each individual, we just need to put this whole team of people around the patient and the family members just to be able to help in some way possible. And it is difficult. So there is no right answer. The best thing I would say is, one of the Catholic social teachings is the idea of solidarity. When we say it requires a whole village to raise a child, it requires a whole village to send someone off, because each individual is so large, right? A whole life lived. And it requires a whole lot of people to speak to every aspect of this individual. And very often, it's not just one person who can do all of this. And it's impossible to expect just one person to do all of this. But for any one person who even desires to do this and to spend some time to try to think of the right words to say, I would say that's more than enough. And then we feed it forward and we try to help the next person who goes through the same journey.
Thank you, Shirley. Eugene, any response?
Infinity. When I took care of my grandma as she was dying at home, I think one of the challenges was also communicating with her, because I didn't know her language very well, because she spoke mainly Hokkien, and my Hokkien was very rudimentary, and so the most I could do was, like physically tending to her needs. What I'm trying to say is that I think at the end of the day, of course, to every individual, the response may be different. But I think the key thing is about listening. I mean, giving the opportunity to know the person more. I think, like Shuling said, I know that each person has such a long life story, a large part of their lives. Perhaps we didn't get a chance to know them. I think the greatest gift that we can give to another person is our time. So I think if we have the opportunity to do that, if in future, I'm not sure, Michelle, what you're exactly asking, but perhaps I can consider that you may be thinking, what about in the future if this situation happens again, how may you approach it? Then I would say, give them your time, give them your ear, and allow them to tell their story. I think that will be the key thing. We don't need words. Words are usually difficult, yeah. But I think it's to invite them to tell us more about who they are, and to know them as a person. I think, yeah, that would be, I think, such a gift. Yeah. Thank you.
You know what Sister Teresa said about dignity? Dignity is actually what all of us give to the person. The person, everyone has inherent dignity, but the recognition of that is by the people around them. The most poignant part of the movie for me was a very simple thing. I don't know whether you remember, the professor had just had his shower after a long day, after that race or something. And then uh, Lucia had just bathed him, and then she wanted to put his pajamas on. And then he said, "Give me the nice shirt. I want to go out." And then Lucia said to him, "Oh, but you're tired and you have a cough." And then the professor said to Lucia, "Tell me, is my request a wish or a fantasy?" And Lucia said, "It's a wish, and therefore a wish can be easily achieved." And so they went out and he spent the whole afternoon out in the sun. So dignity is about hearing the other person in the thing that they need. And then if you notice at the end of the movie, the professor was describing his most happiest time was when he went hiking up somewhere and saw this beautiful river. So to him, being out in the sun, being out in a beautiful garden was inherently important to him. So that's about how we give dignity to someone, that we see them, that we recognize them for who they are, and we hear them in the many ways they try to speak to us.
Thank you, Shalini, and thank you, Eugene, as well.
Michelle, sometimes
sorry.
I also
Yes,
feel that, sometimes I also feel that, when we are accompanying a person, like my personal experiences, we may not need to say a lot of words, but being present there for the person, being silent to let them feel an assurance that we are there. It's a sense of an assurance to the person that you are there for them. And that's what they want, to know that you are there. Like Eugene says, we give our time. But the many times we want to give them many things. We think that by giving them, we will make them happy. Yes, we make them comfortable. But I think the most important is by being present, and you don't even have to say a word, but just to be with them there at that moment is also very important. I mean, sometimes you look at Lucia and the patients there, she just sits there listening. And I think that by listening to the patient, she's also going through her own experiences of her grieving. And she also feels, and there's also a form of healing for her and for the patients as well. So silence is also a very important language in the presence of a person who's spending their last moments in life.
Thank you, sister. And that's exactly what the professor also said, right, about silence. I think if you recall one of the scenes, because like what sister mentioned, Lucia actually doesn't really speak that much when she's around with the patients. But that silence there, the professor mentioned that, it's also another way of communicating. But I like just make a very quick connection, right, to what Shulin shared as well, in terms of how this connection, not just with people, but also the outside world. And I think that in the movie, at least to me, it seems like there were two different very distinct spaces. One is the space of the hospice, and the other space is outside. And you notice that, of course, because of the natural light and everything, I think that the scenes that deal with outside usually involve your gardens, your flowers, the family that connected one another with the children, right? She, at the point when she was at the waterfall and she was connecting with nature, even the son, when he hiked up to recce the track, right, the bicycle track trail, the extreme sport track, but at the same time after that, leading on to then do a walk. I think that there's a lot of this whole theme of connection, if I may use that word again that Eugene used just now. It's not just about with human people, which obviously is the case here in this movie, but also with outside, right, with the outside. So maybe it's got to do with the spaces. And I like to, throw this question to some people in the audience, but also to our panelists as well, in terms of the space of this hospice. that is presented and is represented. Because I think I don't know whether you feel the same way, but the lighting all seems to be a bit gray, or white, or a bit dull. And then after that, when you have outside with the nature, you get a lot more warmth and colors with the flowers and everything and nature. And you start thinking, wow, is the hospice really such a depressing place? Does it have to be? Of course, there are some moments, right, when that race, I love that race that happened. That was just hilarious. I felt that was a moment when they were trying to find that connection within a space that to them felt very, very different, obviously, right? The professor, one of the things when one of the patients actually said, welcome to the hospice, and the professor responded, do you know what this place is? Like, what's with the welcome, that kind of thing. So maybe to the audience, as well as to our panelists, right? Maybe to the audience first, okay? Because I see some points here, some words that came up, and I don't know whether it's related to that. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I see frustration. I see also in terms of perplexing, right? Maybe in relation, if you have any particular response to how the space is portrayed of the hospice. Does anybody have any views on that in terms of whether in the film or what you feel about such spaces?
I think I have a response.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Whoever's speaking right now.
Cheryl.
Oh, hi, Cheryl. Yeah, because I haven't see, I only see three other faces here.
Oh, okay. So I just feel that for a person's like last journey or last leg of their life, I think that having a very nice like place to be residing is like a thing that should be of priority. Like, but at this point, like if you think about it, even in Singapore, hospices are not exactly the nicest places to be in when you're actually facing death and all those stuff. So I feel like the contrast between like the outside world and the space in the hospice, I think that is a good point to actually be raising to the like the government officials or whatever who are actually dealing with this whole aging population thing in Singapore. I think that this is a really good point to be made. I think that it's also something that should be taken into consideration as well, because everyone deserves a good send-off.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Anybody would like to add to that from our audience?
Timothy, I think
Yes.
I wanted to ask something in relation to because I think just now, Sister Teresa, you mentioned about healing, right? Just being there for the person on the last leg of the journey, and I think the space helps as a way of healing as well. Just to be in a place that is peaceful and that is visually quite plain and minimalist at the same time, a lot of nature. But I think I also want to ask the question, maybe to the panelists, and any of you, Eugene, Shuling, or Sister, is that there's always this elephant in the room of death that is impending, right? So how do we break the ice with the patient, or how do we have that conversation that I think needs to happen, right? In a sense, how do you talk about death, especially in Asian culture where it's kind of taboo to talk about death? And people may think, hey, why they may be pantang or something, right? So how do you start a conversation, and has there been any experiences where it was quite received negatively, and how did you have to work around it? Because I think a lot of us who have maybe parents who are aging or grandparents who are gonna facing a terminal illness, how do we as maybe children, grandchildren, try to break that conversation with them? Because you also want to know what their wishes are for maybe the generations or their family members, or what they hope they would do with their ashes, for example, just to ask a very direct and practical question out there. So any of the panelists, thank you.
Before Shuling says anything, I just want to respond to Cheryl and Timothy by saying, actually, if you think a hospice is a very sad place or ugly place to be in, you haven't visited a CC hospice. Okay. And I don't know, of course now COVID is a bit tough, but it's an opportunity to happens. I'm sure Shuling will be very happy
I used to
invite you to
caroling over there at LCC. So I kind of
The current one?
no, the old one. I think it was in
Yeah.
2013 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a very different place now.
That's good.
You know,
And on that note, over to you, Shiling.
I really want to give thanks, to, the FMDM nuns, the Franciscan Missionaries of the Divine Motherhood. Their legacy of love and care for the Singapore community has translated through the 50 years. And being hospice and palliative care in Singapore is not easy because it's a pioneering service. We only got more mainstream funding last year. So for all the hospices that you see in Singapore, it's through great endeavor for people who believe in it to be able to want to do hospice care and to even try to build a facility. So with truly the grace of God, we were able to build a new facility. And that part, if you come to see the new Assisi Hospice, it's not that Assisi Hospice is like that because we had the money to do it. None of that. It's because our legacy from our FMDM nuns, the understanding that palliative care is supposed to be life-giving, and exactly what you see in the movie, that it's so when I saw the movie and I saw how minimalist the facility was, I was like, oh, ouch. It's painful. So at Assisi, we've managed to try our best to represent what hospice care ought to look like. So the space is filled with light. It is a warm space. It is cozy. It's filled with greenery. And just very fortunate that our Catholic values have allowed us to imagine such a space. So thank you, Eugene, for jumping in. Yeah.
And back to Benjamin's. Should I continue on Benjamin's question?
Please, of course, feel free to do so.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I thought that's a very common concern and question. And I would say this thing about this idea about, oh, this is being an Asian value. Actually, I wouldn't say it's just an Asian thing, because when I was in the States, I think people also worry about that, but of course it's slightly different kind of situations. Yeah. And in my experience taking care of the dying, sometimes it's actually the children who don't want to talk about it, but the patient and the parent actually want to talk about it, but the children say, "Mom, you're not dying yet, don't talk about this," Yeah. So I think we don't need to think about it like, oh, this is the way our Asian values are. I think it's just a fear of things that we're not comfortable with. The truth is, many of people know that things are not right with their selves. And in my own experience, people are literally dying to tell someone. They want someone to know what's going on. Yeah. Of course, they are also afraid, because they are also afraid how would the other person respond. Because like if the person says don't talk about it, then like there's a certain rejection. Yeah. So it's like, oh yeah, should I say this? Because if I say this, then they tell me you shut up, And also sometimes if we don't actually allow people to know what's exactly going on, they may imagine things that are worse than they actually are. They may not get a chance to really discuss what's exactly going to happen, especially time, right? I mean, timing, knowing the timing is helpful, because if I know, okay, if I have 3 weeks left versus 3 months versus 3 years, it makes a difference what I'm going to do with my life and how I'm going to respond. Yeah. So I would say more often than not, people want to know. Yeah, but we all fear how we each other are going to respond to it. I think for healthcare professionals, a lot of us sometimes are afraid to be uncomfortable ourselves because it's a difficult topic. And or if I'm afraid that, oh, the person starts crying, then alamak, I don't know how to deal with that. How do I deal with somebody who's having emotions? But the truth is, most of the time when this happens, it's not necessarily very, very emotional. I mean, people respond in varied ways. Yeah. So I would say that, Benjamin, if you're saying that, okay, how do you talk to a family member about it? If you know that a family member has a life-limiting illness and you want to talk to them about it, I think the first is to allow them the space to actually talk about it. I would, of course, want to, we talk about environment, right? So I think setting the environment is very important. Where are you going to talk to this person about this? I think it needs to be a place where very clearly you're indicating that you're going to talk about something important, right? You want to have a certain amount of privacy, a certain amount of quiet. You don't want to have this kind of conversation in a very noisy place. You want to make sure that the person is comfortable enough, because if the person is in discomfort, then it's hard to really think clearly sometimes. Yeah. In fact, I think in the hospice and palliative care field, I would say that the role of the doctors, although important, is not the most important. The role of the doctor fundamentally is to make sure the person is comfortable enough so that the more important work is done, which is to really, have time with their families or the people that are important to them, and to, deal with the non-physical issues, the spiritual issues, the psycho-emotional, the relationship issues. But if they are in discomfort, then they can't do that. And that's the role of the doctor and the nurse to help them be comfortable enough so that the more important work is done. So the space and the time, you need to indicate to the person, I am going to give you time. I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to give you, as Sister Teresa said, you're going to give them your attention. That this is important. I want to know what's going on. Yeah. You don't have to go straight to like, oh, tell me what you want to do if you're dead, Yeah. I think it's about your relationship with the other person. I can't tell you exactly, because it really starts from your relationship with this person. It's your mom. Sometimes the relationship could be bad. And you're thinking, this is a bad relationship. How are you going to talk about this, right? But I think as long as you are trying to reach out, you're trying to connect, I think, and giving that space, you don't have to say a lot. You just sit there and say, I think there are some things that are important that we need to talk about. I wonder if you're ready. But before that, I think we also have to ask ourselves, are we ready? Because sometimes we want to run away from those conversations. It can be hard, yeah. So sometimes it helps to go along with somebody else. Sometimes if you have the benefit of having a palliative or hospice team working with you, then you can also ask them to facilitate such conversations. Some families really, they say, I don't know what to say, I want to say, then like somebody in the CC hospice team or one of the hospices, they could avail one of their team members to say, come, let's sit down and let's do it together. Yeah. Okay. I shan't. There's a lot more, but I think that should suffice for now. Thanks. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Thanks for your insights. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think on that note, because it is, I mean, we have, in case you haven't realized, it's been about 45 minutes since we started this panel discussion. And like what Eugene mentioned, right, there's just so much more that we can talk about, so much more that is more personal, right? So much more that that not just is related to our own experience, but also to this issue, this rather heavy issue. And I really appreciate and thank all of you, both audience as well as the panelists, for sharing, you know, your various perspectives on this very sensitive and rather heavy topic to unpack. And really, if I had to sum up, right, in a way, just very quickly, it's really about holding space, isn't it? When we talk about how we help hold space in this transition from one life to the next. And we talk about holding space, it's not just about the physical space, it's also the emotional space, the relationships, the relational space, you know, the psycho-spiritual space, all of that helps them to be able to have closure, to move on, to be ready for that, both for the patient as well as for ourselves, people who encounter them, loved ones, people who care for them. So I invite you to continue to reflect on this as we close this session, to think about how then might we continue to hold space for one another, you know, both in not just towards the end of our lives, but at any point in time, in the way that we live. And so with that, I'll pass just very quickly back to Benjamin, maybe, I mean, do you have any last things that you wish to say before we say goodbye to everybody?
Yes, so I just like to thank everyone again. Thanks, Timothy, for moderating such a great discussion. Very big thanks to our panelists as well. And we'd like to just close off with a group photo. So I invite everybody who is on Zoom to turn on the webcams. Yeah, so we try to have a group photo of everybody here, you know, just to have capture your smiles wherever you are. Yeah, just to put a face to the name. If not, we'll just see your name there. Yeah. And also, just a quick reminder, we have put in a group chat the link to our feedback. So if you guys have any feedback for us, please feel free and please be honest. And we will take your feedback into consideration for future editions. Yeah, okay. I realize some of you say you're shy, but that's fine. So no worries. Okay, our technical team will take a picture and we'll count down. Okay, so
Okay.
yes.
On the count of three, all smile, please. Okay, on the count of 3, 3, 2, 1. Okay, done.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Catch all of you soon again. Okay, bye-bye. Blessed day ahead.
Then I think we have a question from Ray.
Yes.
Yes, regarding the films, I think. Maybe I think you'd be the best person to answer that.
Oh yeah. I will need to reach out to her really. Yeah.
Is this Ray her?
You have I'm not sure, man. Like it doesn't say on the chat. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm just wondering. I'm just thinking out loud because just now Cheryl mentioned about Ray her. So right.
Yeah, it probably